You are listening to the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show hosted by Doug DeVitri, your source to increasing sales, productivity, and the customer experience. In each show, we will sit down with world-class thought leaders to discuss latest trends, innovative concepts, and ideas to keep you ahead of the curve using the latest technology. Welcome everybody back to the Screen to Screen Selling Show hosted by Doug DeVitri. Today we have a very special guest, Don Hutson, who's been someone who I've admired his body of work from everything that he's been able to accomplish. We're going to get into a lot of things that you've done. Don, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Doug. I'm delighted to be with you.
You know, and I want to just take you back. Probably it's something I haven't told you before, but when I got started in real estate sales back in 2004, there was a CD that was published. It was one of the speeches that you had given, in talking about the Jet Ranger helicopter and adding value and understanding buyer profiles and everything. And I've listened to that so many times, I think I could probably give that speech myself. So, I want to thank you for being a big influencer, early on in my career. So, really today's topic is about getting to the point, having...
Well, you're very welcome, Doug. That's what it's all about. We cast it on the water, and we know that we help some people. We don't know which ones or how much, but we just know that we're out there with a philosophy of abundance doing the best work we can do.
Yeah, great. And, looking at what we're doing, or what you've done with, the 1 minute entrepreneur and the 1 minute negotiator, really getting to the point how sales leaders can impact their sales teams, and even how sales teams can work with their customers. How can, in today's dynamic market with technology, get to the point quicker and having some of these conversations, like we're having right now?
Well, Doug, I'd say rule number one is you've got to talk in terms of the other person's interests and what their buying motives, what their philosophy is. And if we get right into them right away, that's going to help. Too many salespeople today say, let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about our company. Let me tell you why we're special. Let me tell you. Well, in the 1 minute entrepreneur, Ken Blanchard and I put a philosophy on the table that the greatest salespeople are the men and the women who lead with their ears. In other words, they're really good listeners, and they find out what they can, and they immediately go to the interests of the prospective buyer. That keeps people's attention, and it moves the relationship along much more efficiently.
Yeah, great. And in this type of environment where we're not face to face in person, but we're screen to screen, many times I see sales presentations delivered, loaded full of features and loaded full of benefits without really listening to the customer. How can you better listen with the technology that we're using right now so you're focused more on the customer?
Well, let's do all the homework we can do in advance. Let's learn all we can about them. Let's ask really good questions. I love to ask salespeople, tell me how you are different from and better than your competition. And any salesperson who says, duh, to that question, I know is really in trouble. So we've got to project a degree of caring, a degree of positive spirit, a degree of true interest in them. And the best way we can do it is ask really good questions. Now, some people say, well, how good do the questions need to be? And the answer to that is better than the questions your competition is asking. More thoughtful questions. I told a sales manager once, one of the greatest exercises you can do is at your next sales meeting, require that every salesperson bring in print, the best needs analysis question they can come up with. And if you got 12 people in the room and everybody's brainstorming and sharing ideas, everybody's going to get a word or two here and a phrase there and something that will help them craft better questions. And that's critically important, especially early on in the relationship.
Yeah, one of the ways to build trust is by asking really good questions. What would you say to, using some of the technology we have, and we can obviously run into issues if it doesn't work the way we want it to, how can you better build trust with somebody, let's say with somebody you've never met before?
Well, this is a really ticklish situation. I believe in business relationships that trust and stress are inversely proportional. And the reason the high-pressure selling and hard closing doesn't work anymore is it immediately increases interpersonal stress. And as stress goes up, trust comes down.
Mm.
And that means you're going to be on a long road. If you ever sell them at all, you're going to have a long sales cycle and some real hardship in your process. So let's do everything we can to get them comfortable. And if our initial contact is on the internet, or maybe it's followed by a telephone conversation prior to an in-person visit, let's ask some good questions on the telephone. Let's be very thoughtful in our approach, and let's ask them to drill a little deeper from time to time, and let's learn what we can as fast as we can, and that's going to be helpful.
Sure, and with getting to that, from the sales, moving back to the management side, how would you stress to management the importance of having some of these real conversations, where you're asking better questions rather than just saying, here's your number that you have to meet, go out and hit it?
Yeah, I think really good sales managers they've got to be more thoughtful than just saying, here's your number, you got to hit it. Dr. Peter Drucker said that our greatest responsibility as a manager or a leader is to provide our people with everything they need to succeed. And any deficiency in that regard is a reflection on management rather than on the salesperson. So we've got to always be asking, Megan's productivity has really been down. I need to go ask her what she needs to succeed and do all I can to provide it for her. That type thing.
Yeah, sure. And I guess when, let's say if you're working with an inside sales team where the sales manager isn't always in the same location with their salespeople, it creates some issues. That culture is a little bit different than it would be with a live office. What would you recommend to some of the sales managers who are trying to bridge that gap to create a positive culture, to increase sales?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I think it's okay to over-communicate. It's just not okay to under-communicate, because that's when real problems start occurring. So let's communicate on several fronts, numerous mediums, as best we possibly can. And let's make sure, number two, that our communications is more positive than negative. I think sales managers who use any and every opportunity to beat up a salesperson because they're not making enough calls or not doing this or not doing that can be very counterproductive. We need to catch them doing something right from time to time, as Blanchard says. Let's do everything we can to be an encourager, a provider of tools, and anything we can that's going to help them go to the next level.
Yeah, great. And in looking at going back to the sales side of it, one of the benefits of using the technology is we can have shorter conversations that get to the point rather than kind of ramble on with a lot of different alternatives. What would you suggest for sales professionals working with customers, or maybe it's even management working with their agents, to be able to shorten the amount of time that you spend with one another to create the most amount of impact?
Let me give you one example on the negotiations front.
Please.
Our book was entitled The 1 Minute Negotiator. It's based on the idea that negotiations does not have to be something that takes a long time to get done. In fact, we all have numerous negotiations every single day, many of them on a personal front. We used the example of my co-author, George Lucas, flew from New York to Nashville after a speaking engagement, and he went to Enterprise Rent-A-Car to go 45 miles away to a golf tournament where his wife and two sons had just driven up from Memphis to Dixon, Tennessee to do the tournament. So George is going to meet him there. He walks to Enterprise, and he is doing the paperwork. He notices there's a $100 drop charge to leave the car in Dixon, which is not very far. And George said, "Wow, $100 drop charge. That's a little excessive, isn't it?" And the guy said, "Well, I guess that is a little bit much." And George is thinking, I'm on my personal nickel here. If I can just save $50, I'm going to try to do it. Anyway, the guy says, "Well, what do you think is a good number?" And one of the philosophies of good negotiating is let them put the first number on the table. And George said, "Well, I don't know. What do you think?" And he said, "Well, is $25 okay?" And George said, "Well, I had a different number in mind, but that'll work." So in less than 1 minute, he saved $50. It's an example of how there's time compression taking place in everything. And that's true with negotiations, with communications, and with all aspects of putting a transaction together. So the key is, let's be proficient. Let's get inside our prospective buyer's head as early as we can, and let's be as valuable to them as we possibly can. We all heard about prospects who've been working with people, and they're with them with or one or two interactions and they say, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this person. They go on to the next salesperson because they're frustrated with either the interpersonal skills or the lack of attentiveness of that salesperson. So we're off to a bad start. So you're right. Time compression is critical.
Yeah. And really from, with the time that we spend, let's say flipping the role from the trainer, or even the trainer aspect, we have only a certain amount of time that we're able to spend, and people's attention spans aren't as big as, they probably were before, because with all the different distractions. How do you get to the point with some of the training that you do? So let's say that participants are able to get the most amount of value in the least amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a salesperson could say, I'm excited about telling you some of the things we do in our organization, what our deliverables are, and how we're able to provide extraordinary service. But before we get into all of that, is it okay if I ask you some questions? Because your ideas, your opinions, your priorities are what really counts right here. Most people will say, well, sure. And then you start asking some really good questions. You start to fill in a lot of blanks really rapidly if you're asking good questions. Hopefully you're taking notes as you go. And as you do that, you're compiling information that's going to help you do a better job. Every bit of data and information you're able to gather early on is information you can refer back to as you go through the sales process. Sure.
And one of the things that I've seen you do a number of times is in a training session, you'll and I don't know if you still do it now, but working with transparencies where you're filling the blank. You mentioned filling in the blank to figure out how to be able to navigate based off of what other people need. And now we can do that, screen to screen. What do you see some of the trends with education, with all the work that you're doing with U.S. Learning and helping your corporate clients?
Well, from an educational point of view, the key today is engagement. And frankly, some of the rules have changed pretty dramatically, Doug, in the last several years. The fill in the blank thing is not quite as compelling and engaging as it used to be, but we've got to have something that's going to keep people's attention in the teaching process. Like in our virtual training program, and most of our content is now online and available. And we have spent a lot of money to produce it in an exceptional manner. And the whole idea is we want people to say, wow, when they have this learning experience. Mm-hmm. So we've done a number of things. We made it interactive. We've got built-in questions with multiple choice answers. And to do this online is it's an expensive production process, but it gives you an end product that people really get engaged in. They start, they go to the finish, they stay with it. And at the end of it, they're certified and they feel really good about what they've learned. So, through the years, we learn how to do things better and better with every year that goes by. And that's what we've attempted to do at U.S. Learning.
Yeah, great. Well, Don, you've been a role model in so many different ways. You've won every award that I aspire to win, hopefully at some point.
Thank you.
And a great role model for the profession. So really appreciate your support and your help with this interview.
Well, Doug, you are very welcome, and good luck to you in your career and all of your endeavors.
You are listening to the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show hosted by Doug DeVitri, your source to increasing sales, productivity, and the customer experience. In each show, we will sit down with world-class thought leaders to discuss latest trends, innovative concepts, and ideas to keep you ahead of the curve using the latest technology.
Another person to join early. Well,
if you're familiar with Google Plus, how to do a Hangout, or even like Join.me and some of the other screen sharing things I've seen.
Oh, congratulations!